What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Cafe podcast. It's your boy, Devin Gonzalez, and today I got my friend Doug Mitchell on with us, and he is the owner of Building Great Sales Teams and the host of Building Great Sales Teams podcast. He's a serial entrepreneur, and his journey, both professional and his personal development journey, is definitely one you guys will want to take notes on because I know he's already faced some battles or overcome some obstacles that you either are facing now or will face in the future. So, Doug, let's dive in.
It's
How's everything
going
going,
great,
man?
brother. We just got done with Thanksgiving. We're getting ready for Christmas, and so we're doing all the extracurricular activities with the kids, trying to hit the sales numbers before Christmas comes so we can truly enjoy the holidays.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive in. Explain what is building great sales
hmm
teams, both the podcast and the business
Yeah,
itself.
at the end of the day, building great sales teams is just my consulting brand, right? And so for my company, I'm a sales program builder. So, typically what I hear from people oftentimes where they're going to end up working with me is I need to build out my sales program. I need to hire my first salesperson, or my team's not hitting the KPIs, or I'm having trouble recruiting. These are all like pain points that typically lead into a company either, taking my course or engaging me in one-on-one consulting, or yeah, just seeking out the podcast and getting the resources from there, right? And so I spent 14 years building out sales programs for Fortune 500s, AT&T, Vivint, DirecTV, as well as we had a solar division at one point. And so what I was really good at was, taking a product and building out a sales team for that product and understanding, okay, what level of recruits do we need coming in, onboarding, training, all the systems that go into the sales program. I realized from a young age and getting the opportunity to own a sales organization that I was very good at the systems and the processes behind it and building out programs that scaled quickly.
Nice. So let's rewind it a little bit. What before your entrepreneurial
hmm
career, what were you doing before all this? That before you were an
Getting fired a
entrepreneur?
lot. Um, I
I
Yeah,
honestly I can
my
relate on that
first,
one.
10 jobs, I definitely got fired from most of them. So I had your, typical start, of a non-college educated person, right? Fast food, and then into the restaurant, and then into, working with my hands, building overhead doors like the ones you see open up at Walmart. And my problem was every job that I had, I always wanted to tell my boss how to do their job better. I had this way at looking at processes and systems, and in my head I saw it on paper in like a timeline form. And then between each stage in the timeline, I saw these basically efficiency percentages, and it always developed that way at a young age. And I was like, okay, well, this is not efficient from here to here, so how can we make this better? And I would just like verbalize it and throw up on my superiors basically on how they could do their job better or how we could make the system better, and nobody ever wanted to hear it. And god forbid at 19 years old you didn't take my word as gold, right? And so I got upset and
Right.
emotional, you know what I mean? And so typically I got asked to move on from a lot of different positions. And what I found was over time, if I calculated that conversation in a performance review or when they actually asked for that kind of information, that I was a lot more effective. But luckily, I ended up working for another entrepreneur that had several different businesses that he was operating. So I got to live vicariously through him. I got to see all these systems and processes in these different businesses and then work on those individually. I was a marketing manager, but whether he knew it or not, I ended up being his fractional COO for all these businesses because I was putting together the technology, the systems, the sales process, all that type of stuff. I just threw myself into a bunch of different stuff he never asked me to do. And so it gave me a lot of real world experience plus the feedback of somebody that was making multiple seven figures. And so then he started a sales organization called Argenta Field Solutions. And what Argenta Field Solutions did was door-to-door sales for AT&T. And one of his salespeople convinced him to start it. He dumped 200 grand into it, lost it all, couldn't make it profitable. That salesperson left, wouldn't manage the company anymore. So he asked me to step in to see if I could bring it back to black. Right. It took me about 3 months, but I was able to do it. And the reason I was able to do it is because I simply knocked doors for 90 days and then documented the process, you know, and taught other people how to do it. And placed some ads on hiring sites and started figuring it out as I went. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I was setting up my first complete sales program, from the script to overcoming objections to the opportunity structure. And all I was doing was building a program that I would have wanted when I was 19 or 20 years old. I was 23 at the time. And all I was doing was building a program that I would have wanted then. So basically, I was building a company that was attractive to me when I was younger, which I wanted to attract those
Right.
ambitious, entrepreneurial minded uh, men and women that wanted to go and accomplish big things in life, And if I could get them for a couple of years, that would be enough to start building and scaling the company. They could learn what they needed to with us. They could continue moving up in the company with us, or they could move on to college, or they could move on to a corporate position or building their own business. We didn't care as long as they developed within our company, and so that was one of our philosophies. You may not end up here long term. If we can be a ladder or a rung in your ladder of success, then we're more than willing to do that. So those are just some of the ways that we built out the company when we first started.
And then what was your like transition from there into like entrepreneurship?
So I mean that. Oh yeah, that's a good point, right? So after those 90 days, the previous owner said, "Hey, I want to sell this company. I don't know it that well. And you've got it back to black, so now I think it's sellable." He wasn't able to sell it, and so I eventually was able to work out a deal with him because I saw the opportunity. I saw the business was incredibly scalable. It was
Right.
simple, selling cable door to door. I knew if I went out and knocked on 100 doors, I'd probably have, I probably talked to 40 people. Of those 40 people, I'd maybe have 20 conversations. Of those 20 conversations, maybe I'd get 10 full pitches out. Those 10 full pitches, I knew that I would close two to three of them, right? And those two to three would result in 250 to $300 a day, which back then was a lot of money, especially for somebody that was maybe under 25. You're talking 60 to 70 grand a year. So I knew I had something and I was like, okay,
Hmm.
it's very simple, and the technology at the time was not evolving as fast as it is now. And so everybody had cable. And so I knew it was a scalable opportunity. And I had already seen, I think, like 40 or 50K in income in 1 month, gross for the company. And I'm like, this is probably the best opportunity I'm ever going to have. So I jumped in head on. I asked him to owner finance it to me. I had no money. I was broke. I was making 30 grand a year as a marketing manager before that for him. And so I went all in on it. And my first week in business, I was able to pay myself 1,500 bucks, 1,000 from commission, 500 from the business. And it just grew from there.
I mean, honestly, that's an awesome journey, even that so far. Were you? Because I mean, even at such a young age, you weren't 19 at that time. You were what, 21?
When I started working for him, I was
I'm assuming.
21. And then by the time I owner financed the company, I was 23.
Okay. So, I mean, at 23 years old, that is definitely not like, even I remember myself at 23, like thinking the way you're thinking. So, what were you doing, or did you have coaches, or were you doing any, personal development at that stage? Like, where were you getting the knowledge of owner financing and all that kind of stuff?
Unfortunately, I didn't actually start developing myself or, getting into these masterminds, doing all the things that you and I do now until I was 32. So we're talking like 9, 10 years later,
Okay.
right? Owner financing was just a means to an end. It's like you go to pay for a car, right? And they decline you because you don't have good enough credit. And then the next deal is to go to the buy here, pay here lot, right? And pay a ridiculous interest or whatever the case was. So that I assumed you could do the same thing in business. And I was like, well, why don't I just pay you directly instead of paying a bank, and you make more interest on it, which he did. So he made a lot of money. What I realized is until I completely bought him out because he retained 10% ownership, and then that eventually went up to like 40% through me needing more money, right? When I bought him out, he ended up making like
Yeah.
2 or 3 million over the 10 years that he was a partner in the company. Just and it was completely passive for him.
Wow.
Like he had no member duties, board duties, any of that stuff. He was just a financier in the company. So he did pretty well. Um, but anyways, so yeah, it honestly where it came from is I just had a chip on my shoulder and I was fearless, right? Like we are when we're young like that. And I didn't really know what losing looked like because I was coming from a losing hand, right? No no father present for the most of my childhood. I had a really good stepdad for 4 or 5 years. And mother, I moved out when I was 12, and basically my mom didn't come after me or come to get me, right? I moved in with my aunt and she was good with that. She's like, you just be better off. And now when I look at my daughter and she just turned 13, and I can imagine her coming to me and saying like, hey, I'm gonna move in with my tia, and which is aunt in Spanish. I'm gonna move in with my tia,
Yeah.
and this is where I'm gonna live now. I would just laugh in her face, like you're crazy. One, she wouldn't want to,
Right.
but
Right.
two, I would never, let that happen. So obviously, I had mommy issues and daddy issues. I had abandonment issues, all that stuff. So I had this big chip on my shoulder, and it was like, hey, basically, I'm going to um quell the world into admitting that I'm worth something, I'm somebody, all those things that a lot of us entrepreneurs, when we get into our first business, or the reason that we go into business for ourselves is because we feel like we're underappreciated, underutilized, unseen, right? And so we start a business and basically force the world into seeing us. And so I think that was my mindset going into that was I was going to prove myself to myself and to the world basically by starting my own business and being successful at it. So, and I definitely did that in a material sense initially. We went from 3 salespeople to 110 in 3 years. We went from our first full year
Wow.
doing 300K to in our third year doing 4.8 million in commissions. And so I went out and I did that. And what I found, which I think your listeners would appreciate, especially if they haven't done 7 figures or multiple 7 figures, what I found was it didn't scratch the itch that I was trying to scratch. It didn't fill that void that I had. It didn't get rid of the chip on my shoulder. You put these big numbers out there and you're like, when I get there, everything's going to be good and I've made it essentially. But what you find out is, oh, hey, I'm still broken because I never worked on my shit. I'm just broken and I have money. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Which is kind of worse than being
Yeah. Yeah.
being not being broken and not having money. Being broken and having money is almost worse because you don't do the right things with the money.
So would you say that you realize that, like your goals necessarily shouldn't be set as like tangible objects necessarily, but more as like intangible, like, values or milestones in that
Yeah,
sense?
I would agree with that for the most part. I think it's more about having a diversified portfolio of ambitions, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to own a 7 figure business or an 8 figure business. I mean, that's a admirable ambition, you know. But you have to be diversified in the sense of, I want to be, a great leader. I want to lift others up. I want to empower others, and be a force in the world for good, you know. But in order to do that, you do have to face your shit, essentially. You got to face your demons. You got to face these traumas that you may have had in your childhood, and even if you haven't, let's just say you grew up in a well-rounded home, like that does not mean the world won't kick you in the face a few times and you develop some bad habits along the way. That doesn't mean that you
Right.
won't you won't have that trauma in your 20s. So I don't want anybody to think you have to have a, a bad childhood to be successful entrepreneur or successful in any way of life. Um, but you do definitely have to be intentionally upholding your values. You have to be intentionally developing yourself, growing yourself, and you have to be intentionally surrounding yourself with the right people. I mean, and the word from all that is 100% intention. And when you're intentional about those things and you don't allow the world to shape you, then you're going to win. You're going to have the fulfillment. You're going to be able to be present with your family or with your friends or whatever the case is. And you will. You just have so much of a better life when you're intentional about building it versus letting the world kind of tell you what success is, which is money and women and for men, money and women and material things and all these things that don't really matter. They're nice trophies or earmarks or goals, that you might want to hit someday. But, obviously the the figures part of it, the money part of it, when it comes to women, it's having a partner. It's finding that partner that can lift you up, and anything else beyond that, whether it's material or it's value based, it's just being intentional about attaining it.
Definitely. No, I agree with you 100%. Having goals such as, becoming rich or hitting seven figures, eight figures, you know, whatever the case is, having the Lamborghini, like those are all okay goals. Like it's not wrong to have those goals, but you need to strive towards those goals with having your core
Hmm.
values intact and having a sense of like your moral compass intact along the way, and continue to work on yourself so that when you do reach those goals, you're not feeling empty and then realizing this wasn't really the goal that you wanted. It was something else that goal kind of pictured for you. How is your, I mean, I asked this to a few other people that are entrepreneurs and married as well. How is your relationship with your wife? How is your support system with her? Just because I know we're probably
Hmm.
similar in that
Now
nature.
it's amazing. It's amazing to the point of, I look to her for counsel sometimes, or I listen to everything she says because a lot of times there's a lot of wisdom in what she's saying. And it's not wisdom of the world, it's not wisdom of business, it's wisdom of me. It's her knowing me and what I need
Hmm.
and who I am, and recognizing the when the red flags are coming up and she needs to step in and say, hey, you need to do something for yourself, or you need to take care of yourself, you know because she sees me do that all the time. She sees me take on all this pressure and this weight and all these things, and this is just what broken people do. We and just because I've dealt with all this stuff doesn't mean it doesn't rear its ugly head again. So I still have to make sure that I hold it at bay, right? And so we take on all the things, and we create this narrative in our head where it's us against the world. So she has to bring me back to zero sometimes, and make sure that I'm not doing that, right? But it didn't always used to be that way. you know it's that way now because I put God first. I put her second, and then my family third. you know and I don't even, the business is just the means to support all those things. And so it's not even in the top
Hmm.
three, right? It didn't used to always be that way. The business used to be first. And when the business was first, and like I said, I was broken and I hit all these success points. Once I got there, once I got to that 4.8 million in a year, and I was looking back at this amazing income, this amazing business, and all these people that I've impacted, and getting a little bit too much about myself, I still had that hole in my heart, I guess you could say, there, that fulfillment that wasn't there. I wasn't able to be present with my daughter or my sons. You know what I mean? I was always looking at the phone or looking at this status symbol that was my business, where it defined me, right? Where the bank account defined me. And so it always left me empty. So I
Hmm.
kept grabbing at more material things, more worldly things, to try and fill that void. And that didn't work out well for me. Right. And so what happened was I went outside my marriage. I started being unfaithful, and I lived two lives essentially. So I had 13 offices spread across the country, And so I had to go to those offices, audit them, visit them, make sure everything was running well as show face for the entry level people in the company. And so in doing that, I was out of town a lot. And so when I was out of town, I was one person. And then when I was at home, I was the family man, you know? And so it became that became part of me for the better part of a year and a half, right? And eventually, I slipped up and oh, what happened was I was and this is the crazy part. In doing all this, I was also helping my uncle-in-law start up a church, right? And my uncle-in-law asked me to give testimony one day at church, and here I am, this, model of hypocrisy going up to the stage about to give testimony. And, I can't tell you exactly what it was. I know what it was, but I can't scientifically tell you what it was. But when I opened my mouth to speak, nothing
Right.
came out. And so in that moment, God
Wow.
silenced me. It's like, hey, you're not going to give testimony on my stage because you are not a
Yeah.
testimony
Yeah.
for me. You're a testimony for this world of what happens to you when you live for this world.
Right.
And so in that moment, God convicted me and I quit cold turkey because it was an addiction. Some people have drugs, are addicted to drugs. Some people are addicted to drama. Some people are addicted to video games. Mine was women, right? And so I quit cold turkey. I started investing in my family and getting that fulfillment that I had been seeking for so long that I thought building a business was going to give me. And I started investing in them. I started investing in my relationships, my friendships, the people around me. I started investing in my leadership in my business and developing them. And I was doing really well for a couple years, but the only problem was I was still living out of integrity because I hadn't told my wife who I was for the 18 months prior. And so I did. I slipped up. She saw an old email or something like that, and it was incriminating. But I definitely could have played it off. But at that point, I had
Mhm.
carried all this baggage around for so long. I just unloaded everything on her, and I told her the truth. I told her everything that I had done, essentially. And so naturally, she's got this man standing in front of her that is completely different from the man that she married, right? That she doesn't recognize, that is a stranger. And so we separated for about 6 months. I did everything I could to restore the marriage, but she hadn't forgiven me at that point, you know? And so we divorced. We did all the things that you do, when you're divorced and, dated other people and got into other relationships and did the co-parenting thing. And the thing that I did right throughout that process is I put my kids first finally. I I was working maybe 15 to 20 hours a week in my business. I was putting my kids first. Anytime I could get extra time with them, I took it. We were 50-50, but we looked back and we were like, man, it was like 58% me and 42% her, because she had a full-time job, right? She was teaching again. And so what that divorce did for me though is gave me so much context, or not context, a perspective on how big of an impact I had on my kids, and it made me a better father. It did.
Mhm.
It made me more present because I only had them for half the time. And so I made sure that I took advantage of all the time that I could, and it gave me deeper relationships with all of them because I was fully present. And so what happened was 3 years after we got divorced, she was in a relationship, I was in a relationship, and she found her faith again, because she hadn't been going to church this whole time. Neither was I, not really. She found her faith again. She started praying again, and then she had a conviction from God to basically restore our marriage. And what happened was when she started developing that relationship with God again, she was able to forgive me. And once she forgave me, the veil came up, and she saw me again. And then she saw who I was now versus who I was before. And so one of the things I had to make the decision of that helped with this was when I was leaving Corpus Christi, we had moved to San Antonio so she could be closer to her parents. When I was leaving Corpus Christi, having sold our first home, I was looking back at all the decisions that I made and how I basically had destroyed my life by living for the world and not being a man of integrity. So I decided from that moment forward that I had to be a man of integrity, that I had to admit what I had done wrong to everybody that ever asked or this ever applied to. and that I wasn't going to hide this. I was going to own it, you know, and I was going to come on podcasts like this and make sure to warn my young entrepreneurs that, hey, when you get to that point and you're successful and you got all these women throwing everything at you, and you're told to look the other way so you can make more money, and you're told to basically compromise your values, that obviously it's cliche, but it isn't worth it. What's worth it is the people, like your kids, your family, your spouse that you have in your life, and that's what you should be pouring into. So because I was living that way, now she saw me after she had forgiven me. She didn't see this, man that had betrayed her so much before, and we were able to eventually start dating again. She waited until things ran its course with my previous relationship, and she continued to pray for our marriage. And then eventually we were able to go on a date to her cousin's wedding. And a little over a year ago, it's November now, about a year and a half ago, we got remarried.
Wow, that's
Yeah. So
awesome.
your original question was, what is that
No,
support?
no, no, no.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that. No, so I want to go
Mhm.
right into what you're saying. Like, honestly, like your journey in, like, set aside from business, like your realizations and everything that you've overcome, right? It's a true testament to the fact of you are not your past decisions are only made up by your past decisions, right? Everyone makes mistakes. I'm not saying for people to go
Yeah.
make those
Don't
mistakes
do
and be
that.
like everyone does it, but everyone makes those mistakes. But you learned from those mistakes, and if you hadn't, I don't want to give light or praise
Yeah.
to what you did, but if you hadn't made those mistakes, let's say, or and realize you made those mistakes, you might not have necessarily been the dad, the husband, the father that
Hmm.
you are today, because of those mistakes. And the business and everything has that ripple effect too. So I'm glad that you have had that journey and you've had this transformation, on a personal level, because I guarantee that your marriage is probably stronger than it's ever been before. Your relationship with your kids is probably stronger than it's ever been before, which has a healthier ripple effect into your business. Because if you're happy at home and everything is happy at home, you're going to be more successful in your business, more mindful in your business. So honestly, I just want to give you praise on that. Like, honestly, kudos. um, but what it sounded like too in the beginning, on the original question about the support system, right? And I know this from my wife as well, is sometimes they know us better than
A
us,
100%.
right? Like, and so it happened to me, and I only say that because it happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was going to make a move where I was talking about, a move I was going to do with the franchise company, and kind of feeding her thoughts and seeing what she thought and telling her what me and my business partner said. And she was like, "Don't do it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "That's not you. You're going to regret it." And then and I was like, "Why? X, Y, and Z." And she's like, "Listen, this is, I already know you're gonna go back and forth." And then she basically pretty much did what I was gonna end up doing over the next couple of weeks, and basically just like, "Look, this is how it's gonna play out. You're not gonna do it. Stop thinking about it. Don't do it because you're gonna regret it." And I was like, and I thought about the next day, and I was like, "Damn, you're right. Like, that was weird. You've never told me
Hmm.
not to do something when I knew truly that wasn't the move to make." But she just knew me better than me, and she basically was able to do that. So that's awesome that you have that support system now, and that it's back intact and everything like that. How old are your kids, by the way?
My youngest is 9, and my middle son, or my boys are my younger ones. My middle son is 11, and my daughter is my oldest at 13.
Okay, nice. I mean, how's being a father of three? I only have one, so I just got to know what the difference is between one
Oh, it's
and three.
when you go from 2 to 3, it's zone defense versus man on man. You know what I mean? It's very much, the equivalent of entrepreneurship, where you're just like juggling all these different things at once. Whether they got to be fed. I mean, especially when they're little. We're past that stage now. They can take care of themselves. They make their own breakfast. They do the chores around the house, all that stuff. Like, it's 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 amazing. In this is like the perfect moment where they're 9 through 13, and like, you're not wiping butts anymore. You're not cleaning up after them. They can clean up after themselves. They're becoming more responsible as long as you've instilled that in them. And like, I do. I do all this like the yard stuff and the garage stuff and Mr. Fix It. I'm your, typical dad now, But as far as in the house, like the kids take care of everything. They clean the restrooms, they take care of the dishes. I'm the cook also because I love cooking. It's just a passion of mine. But yeah, pretty much my wife, she does dishes every now and then. And yeah, I don't do anything in the house. All my stuff is outside the home and then the business. You know what I mean? And so it's super nice now, man. So you got that to look forward to, and if you have three of them, that's three
Yeah.
people that can do the chores around the house, right? So that's what we have kids for. No, I'm just kidding. But it
I mean, I only have one, but she's
oh
almost
man.
2, and I honestly, I don't know if
Hmm.
it's just the age or what, but I'm like, I don't understand how people could do this with multiple children. Like, she is me and my wife were talking last night, and she is almost like the middle child that everyone says is
Yeah.
the daredevil. That's our first. I was like, if this is our first, I don't know what the second
Oh, and
one's gonna
the
be
the
like.
third one, if you guys have a third, is gonna be even scary. So my third is my like, will run into a burning building to save someone. He's our little protector, but he's also the one that will try anything once. You know what I'm saying? My middle son, he's my problem child. He's like the big he's me when I was younger, where it's like the world doesn't understand me. Like, and he's incredibly intelligent. He's in I shouldn't be saying this on a podcast because they can listen to it later, but he's the smartest one out of all, like natural intelligence, right? My oldest, my daughter, she's the bookworm, she's the responsible one, she's the one that we trust to not burn the house down, you know what I'm saying? And so like they are the cliche, like oldest, middle child, and youngest, and then yeah, my youngest is my wife's baby, he's a mama's boy, all those things too. So no, most of what you've heard is very true, but now it's just, man, their personalities and their resolve, their conviction is coming out. They're just little adults. They're turning into little humans. And they're gonna go be people someday. It's a trip, and it's such a blessing to watch them grow and to be witness to it, and to be able to do your best in guiding them, right? I think parents oftentimes, as they should, they take too much responsibility for their kids when they're their own little people, you know,
Mhm.
and they're gonna have to learn some things the hard way, and just because you know your kids screw up in school or they screw up in society, does that mean they're gonna grow up and be failures or not be successful or not be fulfilled or happy? Sometimes it just means, like it did for me, that I'm not going to be a follower. I'm gonna march to the beat of my own drum, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. As long as they can do the basics of being contributing members to society, right? um and so I think us as parents, we're hard on ourselves with the things that our kids do, but man, that's the character builders, when they screw up, and you're not sitting there coddling them, you're making them work through their own shit and figure it out, and supporting them and just showing up. That's the number one thing you can do as a parent, is just show up.
No, definitely. And I think that you being an entrepreneur, you being into fitness, I see you like you were on a walker or something like that with
Hmm.
look like all your kids, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly. You being physically fit, you being in a healthy relationship with your wife, all those things radiate down to your kids too. Have any of your kids, I know they're still kind of young, but have any of your kids kind of like asked about like your entrepreneur like path or anything like that, where you can kind of see them going the same direction, or is that
Yeah,
still
so
too
my
young?
daughter is the one that's like, I'm taking over your business. You know what I mean? She's gonna run the family business and all these things, and I know better. I know that she's gonna do her own thing. She's way too independent, way too strong to like follow in my footsteps. And I also know my business as it stands right now is not necessarily scalable, something that you take over. It can, she could step into the consultant role, but right now I'm kind of chilling out my business. I'm making sure I make enough to take care of us as a family, and that I can continue investing and doing some things outside of the business. But I also know I only have basically 5 to 8 years left with my kids, and so if I and like I did before where it was like all business all the time, I'm going to lose that. I'm going to lose moments that I don't want to
Right.
lose, so I'm hyper focused on making sure that I spend that time with them if I can and not taking on too much to where I'm missing a whole lot. Like this weekend, I'm going to go speak at Roof Camp, which is an event that David Taggart, uh, uh, a prominent roofer here in Texas, is putting on, and I'm missing a basketball game. I'm missing a UIL competition because it's a 3 day event, But I only have like one of these every quarter, you know, and I do that on purpose. I could have, one a week or one a month or something like that if I went after it. But it's one of those things that's very calculated right now so that I can make sure I put my family first and my kids first while they're this young.
No, that's awesome. So, I mean, that's huge because I think a lot of, especially young entrepreneurs, get wrapped up in their business, and they do put their business first, and all of a sudden you're building this thing for your family, and not saying exactly like how your journey went, but you start to lose your family or the connection with your family in
Hmm.
some form or degree while you're out there putting in
Yeah,
all these hours. And it's like all of a sudden 10 years goes down and you're like, look at what I built for you
yeah.
guys. And they're like, who
Why do
are
we
you?
care?
You know,
you
kind of
know?
deal.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
could see that happening if I had stayed down the same path. And that's not to say you don't have to do it. I mean, there's a reason that hustle culture was created because a lot of people got ahead by hustling, right? And here's the difference. If I
Hmm.
went into that season, like this weekend is going to be a little bit of that season. I'm going to miss some things. I'm going to be working 12, 14-hour days. I'm going to be presenting to groups. I'm going to be having conversation. I'm going to be prospecting, looking for clients, and this event's going to put me in position to do that to where it could potentially set up my year, right? And I
Right.
know that's coming. So, but what I've already done is I've already sat my kids down, sat my wife down, and had that conversation where it's like, hey, this is going to be a busy few weeks at the end of the year. I need to set up the next year. This is why I'm doing it. And putting everybody on the same page, they understand why. Because if you don't tell them why, if you don't
Right.
explain to them what you're doing in your business, which yes, you should explain it to them. You should be um, accountable to your family 100%. And so that's the difference between men that lead because they think they should because they're men, and the difference between men that lead because they want to lead for their families, is the accountability piece. I'm going to come back and uh, let my kids know why I'm doing this, right? And so if they know why, then they can get behind that reason and support you. But if you don't tell them why, they're going to make up their own reasons.
Right.
And guess what the first reason is going to be? Dad cares more about his business than his family. Dad cares more about his business than me
Yeah.
or my basketball game or whatever the case is. And trust me, you don't want to go down that road because then it becomes reality for them over time versus you having to unwind
Right.
that,
And I mean, no, definitely. And I think letting them into the light and explaining why, it also makes them
Hmm.
feel included, right? So just like even when you had your staff and your employees as well, like giving them the understanding of why they're doing it the
Yeah.
way they're doing it, or explaining the purpose of something, or different reasons on the business for your family, for your employees, whatever the case is, giving them more information and explanation lets them feel like they're a part of it versus just being told this is what it is, or that they're not a part of it and that you don't really care as much about them or what they're feeling. So I think that's amazing. So with your speaking, I know you're doing your speaking thing. What else are you currently doing with, building great sales teams and stuff like that besides going to the events and stuff? You said you're setting up your year. What are you looking to set
Yeah, I
up?
would say, probably two events a quarter. One is plenty depending on the event. Next year, I'm gonna go into coaching and not just consulting. So when I consult, it's very specific for the sales program. I go in, I build the sales program, I do some accountability for 90 days after, and then I'm out. Right? I am a temporary, piece of that business that gets inserted. Um, Next year, I'm going into coaching. I've obviously ran my own business for 14 years, and I've experienced, seven-figure success and a lot of challenges along the way. So basically, I have 14 years of experience to bring to other business owners. And so next year, I'll be coaching with Win Rate Consulting, Mike Claudio and his group over there, and I'll be taking on 5 to 10 coaching clients a month with them, and as well as continuing my consulting.
That's awesome. So before we wrap everything up and before, we go into, adding your links and stuff, I want to hit you with, even though you've dropped so much knowledge and advice already, what is the one key advice or piece of knowledge that you've learned over your course of your journey that you want to, distill amongst the listeners?
Documentation. Documentation is everything. It's the foundation. It's the starting point. It is when you go from being a solopreneur to a business owner is when you start documenting things. So when you do that sooner, you're going to be in good shape. So when I look at, specifically the sales program, right, which is a lot of what I'm doing right now, it starts with documentation. And the way that I organize that documentation is an acronym I call CODOC. So the CODOC stands for compensation, opportunity development, operations, and culture. So compensation, you need a comp plan. It needs, for a salesperson, it needs to have the opportunity to make six figures. And then it also needs to show them how to get there, or the composition of deals that's going to get them there, right? And they need to be able to see that, right? And then opportunity. All right. On the backside of that comp plan, you can put an opportunity structure. And again, you're documenting the process in which you see your company growing and scaling and them moving up in the company. And any given one of them based on qualifications to get to the next level. And then when they get there, you're going to develop them. And again, development is going to come through documentation, right? And so whether it is sales training, product training, uh, more importantly, leadership training, and then even more importantly, mindset training, just like your podcast, there is a documentation that needs to happen of that. And one of the things I like to do it in the ways that I document is recording the trainings so that I can distribute them virtually to a company, and I like bringing in experts too. Somebody on health and fitness, like you would come in and talk to a company on health and fitness, right? On staying healthy and growing in their fitness journey. And then they would record that. And then anytime they hired a new salesperson, they would get that training, right? And so that's the development piece. Operations, you got to document your sales flow from the time that you create the opportunity or the prospect to the time that you fulfill the client, and now you're asking for testimonials and reviews. That whole process needed to be documented, whether it's prospecting script, the actual in-home sales module, or sales script at the retail location, and then the fulfillment process, the operations piece of actually installing or fulfilling the product, or maintaining the membership, you know. And then the last piece is culture. Now, typically, if you have documented and built out the first four pieces correctly, that culture is going to happen naturally. Your team, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's doing the same thing in their respective positions because it's documented, And then, like everything else, I was talking about attention a lot earlier. You got to be intentional about culture. And the only way to be intentional about it is to document and scale it, So we're documenting, okay, when do you receive the company swag? We're documenting a meeting structure so that at the beginning of the meeting, we're talking about our core values, and we're recognizing people for displaying those core values this week, And so that documentation creates the intentionality, which creates the culture. And so I would say that's the key thing for me. If you want to scale and you want to get past being the solopreneur, is documentation.
I think documentation in every area, in not just entrepreneurship, but even in
Mm-hmm.
life as well. Like documentation for your social media, for your relationships, all those kind of things. Like if you don't know the information, the numbers, whatever the case is for that area, you can't improve it, right? So I think documentation, that is one of those simple things, but very overlooked things. So I 100% agree with you on that. where can people find you and learn more about, building great sales teams, about your podcast?
Absolutely. So you can go to my site, salesprogrambuilder.com, all my social media links and everything about consulting, the podcast. I even have 3 free courses on there that you can access. It's key player opportunity structure for non-sales centric businesses, and then it's the sales toolkit. So this is just a basic like how to set up your sales script, overcome objections, and how to sell the way customers want to buy. And then the other one, what is the other one? Oh, I can't even remember. But I got 3 free ones on there, and then I do have my course on there as well. And so you can go there, get all the goods and stuff, and then you can follow me anywhere at TXBizDad. All my social media handles are TXBizDad.
And that's not tax biz dad. That's
Yeah,
Texas business
yeah,
dad. For a long time, honestly, when I first started following you, I was like tax. I was like, why are you in tax? And then I was like,
yeah. I
Texas. And then I started seeing some of the
yeah.
barbecues that you were posting. I was like,
My
makes
first
sense.
Instagram handle was TX Barbecue Dad. Yeah.
That's
So I
awesome.
just changed it to Biz.
Well, hey man, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy with not just your family, but you're building great sales teams, your podcasts, your businesses,
Mhm.
your clients. So honestly, thank you so much for coming on today and spreading the knowledge that you've had over your course of your serial entrepreneur
Absolutely,
journey.
brother. Thanks for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure.
Of course, and we'll definitely connect soon.
Sounds good.